socially radical. Socially radical. Socially radical. Socially radical. Socially radical. Socially radical. Guitarist.
Just one kiss is enough to get me drunk right from your lips. I would swim through the deepest oceans just to hear your name. I thought I knew right from wrong, but the blood upon these edges proved me wrong. My mistakes can't be covered. You should cover up. Won't you cover up? Just hold on. Intense like there's no tomorrow. Let's hold on. 'Cause without you, there is no me. I would run through the darkest forest just to kiss your skin. Melt the sun. If it's just 1 second, I could stop the flame. I thought I knew right from wrong, but the blood upon these edges proved me wrong. My mistakes can't be covered. You should cover up. Won't you cover up? Just hold on. Intense like there's no tomorrow. Let's hold on. 'Cause without you, there is no me. You seem to think you found and get here on just for me. You could leave, what could I do? I thought I'd learn right from wrong. I thought I'd learn right from wrong. I thought I learned right from wrong. I thought I learned right. Just hold on. Intense like there's no tomorrow. Let's hold on. 'Cause without you, there is no me. Just hold on. Intense like there's no tomorrow. Let's hold on. 'Cause without you, there is no me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Socially Radical Guitarist. The song you heard just now was from Good Tiger called Where Are the Birds? It's from their first self-released full album, A Head Full of Moonlight. I strongly suggest you go check that out. There's a lot of creativity in that album. Some of the sounds are a little unorthodox that they use in some of the other songs. I picked kind of like the most mainstream out of most of the album, but it's definitely a gem in terms of technical proficiency of the guitars and the creativity with which they change moods. So this episode, I'm going to talk about this song, highlight the way in which they change moods and how the lead guitar inserts himself in a very unique way. I'm also going to be talking about, I'm going to be joined by a guest. I managed to pull it off. We have a guest this time. Her name is Janis Zroback. She's emphasizes what the alternative is to like a nation that's ashamed of itself. It's constantly that has had to look inward on July 1st and couldn't be proud of its method upon which it came into existence. So she's going to be talking about the alternative. She as a political candidate for the Victoria riding. So just getting into Good Tiger's song, Where Are the Birds? The way in which the lead guitar kind of inserts himself, he uses a nice riff, and the riff, the way it's done, even though it's palm mute, actually kind of inserts itself more than the chords. So the chords will go. And yeah, those will be the first bars of the chords. But the rhythm guitar is playing the chords. But what you actually end up really hearing is and that's actually kind of nice. So you hear that that riff sequence go and go. There's a little bit of change up when you hear the second chorus, and it'll go. And the way he goes into the change up it's kind of an interesting thing. He uses it around the second chorus and kind of to give more punch to the second chorus. Maybe he was bored with just using the regular riff, but either way, it's a nice little flavor if you're able to notice it into the song that wasn't there before. Then you hear the chorus, and the chorus, the mood changes completely. So you'll hear that little riff, and when the singer goes into the chorus, you hear. And What's amazing about that is even when the mood changes like that completely, the singer stays mezzo forte and doesn't change basically the way he emphasizes lyrics or even his tone. He doesn't go higher pitch. He just stays mellow, and it ends up working. It's kind of a beautiful way of being able to change the moods, and even just with a few backing vocals, being able to hold that tone, hold that line, and not be drowned out by the guitars. And you'll hear that transition going from the verse to the chorus and then the verse to the chorus again. And then you'll hear a nice, interesting bridge. And then he'll play that little mini chord. And then he'll go back to his. And like when I, introduced the show at the beginning, I was going to talk about the goal of the show was kind of mainly to promote the African, Caribbean, and Inclusion Center's major initiative, and to try to change the situation for refugees when they come into this country. But the main topic of the show was basically how versatile the guitar can be. And I'll be going through a lot of different genres in order to show that versatility. But in this one, you can see the versatility of the guitar just in one song. So you'll hear maybe one mood and one thing being emphasized about the guitar based on the genre. You'll hear different genres and different playing styles. But what's interesting is to see how the guitar can change the mood so drastically within just one song. You hear that in this song, Good Tigers, Where Are the Birds? And you'll also hear it in the next song coming up from 12 Foot Ninja. It'll be called One Hand Killing from the album Outlier. The way that both these bands are able to change the mood in a way that's interesting and a way that's exciting amazes me, and it always disappoints me to see their their monthly listens on Spotify in the 90,000s range, a few 100,000 range, when you see a lot signed like metal bands that don't have that kind of originality or technical proficiency getting a lot more attention and a lot more fame. And it kind of disappoints me to see it, but it also shows kind of the painful reality of the state of culture within our society. It's another thing to be ashamed of, actually. Notwithstanding the, genocide and the elimination of a culture of a whole set of people. But the the fact that new bands can emerge, take these kind of risks musically, experiment musically, demonstrate creativity and talent, and not be rewarded for it. And it makes me wonder what happened with Good Tiger. Is it because they self-released? Is it because they switched between post-hardcore and traditional rock, and they have different mellow moods? Um, like you'll see some post-hardcore bands that are very popular, not with the same originality. Um, you'll see jazz musicians that are signed with the major labels not getting their due, not getting the attention that they deserve either. And it kind of shows um, the lack of culture of you know musical consciousness in the audience. Like I don't think our society values music and creativity and the arts in the way that it should. Um, much of the music is just mass produced, forced out there, um, traditional 4x4 beats, nothing original, nothing particularly exciting. Um, in other cultures and other societies that the refined, British and basically the Anglo-Saxon culture, the cultures of North America like to look down on. There's a lot more creativity and ingenuity with their music. Um, in India, for example, um, in the Middle East, in Africa, even in South America, a little bit. Although they've had some Latin influence as well, it's you can see more diversity. And actually, when jazz musicians went around the world, they found that they were appreciated a lot more in Asia, in the Middle East, in Africa, and in East Asia than they were in North America. Even in Europe, they were treated a little better. Europe has its own, cultural origins, which were imposed on North America. They were imposed on what was originally called Turtle Island. But it's every time I see those Spotify listens for 12-Foot Ninja, an Australian band, and for Good Tiger, it kind of wakes me up to the lack of musical consciousness within our society. Um, and the hope is that if people see what the alternative is and that we rise up, we fight, and we overthrow um, the conventional rulers of this country, that the new music and that the new culture, the new arts that are promoted and protected reflect the diversity of the nation and the diversity of the world, and that they're promoted in a way that a band like 12-Foot Ninja and a band like Good Tiger can get their due. And that's the hope. But it might just be naive, wishful thinking on my part. But yes, the band that's going to be coming up is going to be 12-Foot Ninja. The album Outlier came a little bit after, around 2016. Um, and it shows more of their experimentation that they've been engaged in since they started their journey around 2007, 2008. Um, you'll find that they're able to interchange and transition very seamlessly, um, almost as if they were listening to a lot of musicals, because that's the only real example where you can see something like that happen, where the genre of the music completely changes depending on the mood of the lyrics being expected, the verse, verse to chorus, things like that. With 12 Foot Ninja, it sounds like they've listened to a lot of musicals on how to do those transitions, but it also sounds like they've listened to a lot of jazz, which is, as you know, how I've been classically trained. I began by learning jazz. Um, I was into that instrumental rock when I started, but there were some jazz songs I had to learn, like Arrogant from Wes Montgomery and Take Five from George Benson. And I learned more songs from there, and that's how I was able to, refine my playing and my musical consciousness to the point where I could appreciate things that 12 Foot Ninja does and that Good Tiger does. So with 12 Foot Ninja, it definitely sounds like they've been around the world and listened to a lot of different type of music. Latin music, they've listened to, maybe they've listened to some African music, but definitely a lot of jazz, a lot of the old style kind of jazz within North America, and they've listened, to heavy metal, of course, but the hard rock that you can hear from like the early 2000s when a lot of hard rock bands were coming up. Um, yes, so you're going to enjoy and appreciate the diversity that of the band and the versatility of the band. You never would imagine that a heavy metal in a verse and then a little bridge before the chorus having a little samba music and going back to that really heavy chorus is able to work in the way that it does. But they're able to find a way to synergize it in a way that's seamless and beautiful. And a lot of other musicians appreciate it. I think they've toured with many, including Periphery. So they're well known within the music community because of their proficiency and their skill. Slipknot, they've made a joke because they like to put a little comedy into their music videos, and that they've basically Flight of the Conchords if they decided to play metal. Flight of the Conchords, incidentally, also likes to delve in a lot of Latin music, and to play their guitar that way. They put a lot of comedy in their lyrics. You stop listening to a track for a while and you go back to it, you find yourself laughing a lot. That's what Flight of the Conchords does. If you pay attention to 12 Foot Ninja's lyrics, you're probably not going to get the jokes as much. But if you do it while watching the videos, then you're going to find yourself laughing a lot. So that's basically 12 Foot Ninja. I can find myself talking about them for a long time because of that, how skilled they are. So coming up in the next bit, you're going to hear during the intermission 12-foot ninjas, one-hand killing. And then after, you're going to hear the alternative for us. And the alternative for us is basically, in my opinion, the Communist Party of Canada. And you'll hear from Janis why we need to change course, why we need to change direction in our politics. Not just shift a little bit, but why we need to make drastic change. I'm hoping that with this upcoming interview that I'm able to ask questions that ordinary people would ask, and ordinary people looking and curious about a new alternative will be able to see what the alternative is, what the vision of the party is, and why you should support that initiative or try to build the party in your area. Another thing to note is the party itself is still small. So we have a vision and we have an alternative goal, but we still need to grow. We still need other people with the knowledge and the experience to help support and grow the party. So with the hope, we hope Janis articulates the vision and that people that listen to this interview are motivated to try to help this movement and to build this movement. And yes, with that, we're going to conclude this bit, and what's coming up next is a 12-foot ninja's one-hand killing from the album Outlier. Stay tuned.
Now put your money where your mouth is. You have the method, but will you move mountains? This has become quite a vehicle with a roof or a grandiose ego. You have adapted to the role. Your portrayal betrays your soul. Wherever you may go, may your heart remain yours. Transhuman influence.
All right, welcome back, everybody. So the song you just heard was 12-Foot Ninjas, One Hand Killing. So very excellent musicians. They're really not metal musicians. They're fusion musicians, jazz musicians dressed up as metal musicians. They're quite amazing. So we have our guest. Our guest is Janis Zroback. She is the Communist Party of Canada candidate for the Victoria riding. And yeah, she'll be here, discussing, her political evolution and information about the party. So, Janis, welcome.
Hi, hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So, how did you become a communist?
Well, that's a good question. I think I don't want to sound too cliche, but I think as a little kid, I kind of had some communist leanings, as many kids do. Many kids have a sense of injustice, but they don't necessarily have the words to describe it. And I always sort of felt like a bit of an outcast. Um, my family, they were pretty well off, and we never really went without. And many of my relatives, they were in the military. And I'm a trans person. I was like, kind of an effeminate, gender non-conforming kid, and I didn't really fit in with these sort of militaristic parts of my family. I really didn't fit in with them at all. So from a young age, I was always kind of critical of the military because I saw how it made people, into sort of dominating, toxic, hyper masculine people. And I didn't fit in with that at all, obviously. So that kind of gave me a sort of natural anarchistic leaning. That's kind of where I started. For a long time I kind of had anarchist sympathies, but I sort of knew on some level that it was impractical. I was sort of a soft socialist. I thought of myself. I voted NDP, and I would think like, okay, yeah, maybe this time they'll really do it. Like they'll really become a progressive force, and it just never happens. Wow. Anyway, so it was 2019, and I was working this pretty terrible retail job. I was working in a small drugstore, and here in Victoria, and nearby there was a homeless encampment, and there was lots of homeless people, lots of people on the street nearby. And my boss, well, they hated the homeless people. There were security guards walking all over the place, and there was a very strong police presence. People don't realize, but Victoria actually, I think, has the highest per capita police in all of Canada. It's Victoria, BC. You see them everywhere. It's insane. It's a very hyper policed city. It definitely bears marks of its colonial past.
Is that because it's the capital of BC?
Oh yeah, because it's the capital of BC, and it's very there's kind of a lot of sort of gentrified yuppie hippies living out here, and sort of wealthy boomers and whatnot. So they kind of live out in their nice little suburbs, and they have a lot of police roaming around. So I saw every day how people on the street were being brutalized, and I hated it. And I was, standing behind this cash register, and I couldn't really like do anything. I was just powerless to help. And that's one feeling I hate, is the feeling of powerlessness, wanting to change things and not having any like real way to do so. So I could kind of see the class struggle playing out in front of me, and it didn't click at first, but then I started thinking like, well, what are the police doing? They're not just going and brutalizing people for the hell of it. They are upholding this legal code, of course, and the law is essentially written to punish the poor. So the police are violently enforcing this law which punish the poor. So the police are basically there to enforce this class hierarchy. And then and there, I saw there was a couple instances where that was really, really clear, and it was just like, oh, it's a class struggle. That's what it is. It's a class struggle. It's a class struggle. It didn't come to me at first, but working that retail job and seeing all the police brutalizing the homeless people. We have a very large houseless population here in Victoria. It's impossible to look away from it. So seeing how police are actively not just enforcing a social hierarchy, but like an economic hierarchy as well, that became very clear to me. And at the same time, I think, what was it, 2018 or 2019, there was an election, and that was the last time that I stopped believing in this sort of reformist politic. It just disappoints every single time. And when you think about all the things that we're facing coming up on the horizon, like climate change, and there's always this looming threat of fascism. I see it everywhere. Some people don't see it, but if you look, it's there. These are problems that cannot be solved. These are deep-seated problems that cannot be solved with this sort of reformist social democrat politic. It's just not going to happen. And then and like many people, I had misconceptions about what communism is. Like, I sort of grew up with a lot of Red Scare propaganda. I came across some articles where it's like, oh, turns out many Russian people miss the Soviet Union and want it back. And just sort of little things like that trickling in that kind of made me realize, like, oh, okay, maybe I was wrong about this totalitarian communism thing. Maybe it's not this spooky thing after all. And I looked into it, and it all
Yeah.
started coming together, right?
Yeah, actually, incidentally, the best argument that Putin puts out against the communists is that they dissolved the Soviet Union. That's something that he says.
Yeah.
Politically against the communists, because
Mhm.
it was the communists that dissolved it, not
Right.
anybody else. And even the far right, Zhirinovsky, will say the same thing. The
Hmm.
communists, you dissolved it. So,
Yeah.
so actually, yeah, that's one thing a lot of people don't realize, is that the Soviet Union is something that's nostalgically popular with the majority of the Russian people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Putin, like, he'll use some of that Soviet nostalgia, but only in such a way that that kind of props up his own position. It's like, oh, we had some good times anyway, back to business. It's kind of what he does. And yeah, so that all of this was kind of coming together in the fall and winter of 2019 here in Victoria for me. And that following January, I believe that was when the Trump administration had assassinated the Iranian general Qasem Soleimani, which I obviously saw as this gross, just barbarous act of imperialism, and it really pissed me off. And I noticed this event pop up on my Facebook, like Young Communist League, no war with Iran. And so I went there, and I thought it was really cool that, of all the nonprofits and all these groups that kind of exist in the city, that this Young Communist League, they were the ones who were willing to go out in the freezing rain and hold up their signs and speak out against this act of imperialist aggression. They were willing to go out and do it. So I thought, well, these guys seem pretty cool. I'm going to join up with these guys. And ever since then, just kind of everything that I've learned and everything that I have that I've seen and interacted with, just further cements for me that it was the right decision. Learning Marxist theory, Marxist-Leninist theory. I love to learn. I've been learning as much as I can over the past year and a half, learning about how capital flows, how imperialism works, how Marxists kind of look at history. All of that just really cemented in my mind, like, oh, okay, this is a framework for the liberation, the collective liberation of all of humankind. There's no question about that in my mind at this point. It just became so clear, like a fire burning in my brain.
That sounds, very interesting. So I think you did touch on this a little bit, but maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on what makes communism relevant today.
Well, look at all these bourgeois parties, all the parties that are currently sitting in parliament. Basically, all that they ever have to offer, every 4 years or whenever the election is called, all that they're offering really is, hey, we're going to twiddle some knobs on the machine. We're going to make things we're going to add 10% on the top in this economic sector. Oh, we're going to take this amount of taxes and put it here. All these small, frankly, pathetic, just non-solutions that they're offering here. It's just there's such a lack of vision, and obviously it's intentional. They don't want to change the system too much because they're the middle managers of capital. They want to, just give a little bit more, give a little bit more concessions, but not really fix any of the deep-seated problems. What we need is revolutionary change, and I believe the Communist Party has a general framework for how to bring about a qualitative change in society, how to really take apart the pieces and put it back together in a way that suits human needs truly.
Okay, so it's every 5 years, but
5 years? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's every 5 years. But you are right. You are generally right about doing small things. Honestly, I didn't feel much of a difference between when the conservatives were in charge and the liberals were in charge. So that's actually a good point. So what are the highlights of the domestic aspect of the party program?
Well, currently in this country we call Canada, the biggest domestic cash cow, the biggest source of revenue that we have, obviously, is the tar sands project. And there's a lot of problems there. Obviously, it's just killing the environment, and that needs to change. And most people recognize that. Even a majority of fossil fuel workers, energy workers themselves recognize that, yes, this is going to have to change. We would like to not lose our jobs in the process. We would like to not lose our pensions in the process. That's what they're worried about. But yes, we recognize that this has to change. None of these parties, they don't have the backbone, they don't have the political will to carry out this change. And the Communist Party does, because we're not capitalists. We are a party of the working class, and we have a stake in this, just like all the other working and oppressed masses. So what we need to do is we need to take these major industries and we need to put them under collective control. They are monsters that have come loose, and we need to wrangle them back in. So
does that mean nationalization?
That means, yeah, that means nationalization. That means putting it under state control, but not just under state control. It needs to be under a people's control, right? Because the way that the Canadian state is set up right now, it's not truly democratic. I mean, how much power do people generally have over the things that happen in our country, the economic decisions? It's nearly zero. So there needs to be, yeah, a democratic planned control of these economies, and we need to take control. We need to put them under national control, and then we can start kind of moving in the right direction finally towards the collective good.
Okay. So how do you conceive the domestic policy being able to be enacted? I'm sure there's more details than just nationalizing the oil, and you can talk about how people can find out more about the plan, because we have a limited time for the interview. But
Okay.
but just wondering, we are talking about the current political setup.
Mhm.
Right now, the bills go through the House of Commons, and then after the House of Commons, they reach the Senate. The Senate decides whether the bill goes. There've actually been a few times, very rare, where bills were taken down by the Senate. Do you think the Senate, as it currently is set up, would approve a bill introduced by the House of Commons that managed to get through?
No, I don't think that. And that's why we need to abolish the Senate. That's one of the many of the big changes that we need to do. The Senate is basically there to stifle democracy. They're a holdover from the monarchy, and we need that gone. We need to create a true democracy. So we need to abolish the Senate, and we need to create a true representative democracy. That's
Oh,
what we need. And people can find detail. They can go to communist-party.ca and look at our platform. It's all there in a lot of details. We want to make radical changes to the parliamentary system and have a democratic people's government, a worker state. We want to build a worker state.
okay. So a worker state. Does that imply republicanism? What happens with the governor general? I know you don't want the Senate, but what happens with the governor general, and what role does the governor general play in this workers' government?
Well, we need to cut ourselves off from the monarchy completely. We need to cut ourselves off from this colonial system completely, because the queen, she isn't just a figurehead. She is able to enact some political will. If the people get too rowdy, it will happen. Um, and we don't want that. We need to create an independent state totally without any of this colonial interference.
Okay, okay. So I guess going to the party website is another way of finding how the party sees contemporary events. Is there another website that's kind of good for seeing kind of like the party's sentiment about international and domestic events?
Well, we have our magazine. It's called People's Voice. People can look that up. I do not have my personal I do not have a personal website, but I have a Twitter page and a Facebook page, so people can Google Janis Zroback for Victoria and find out some of my personal takes on that.
Okay. So what are the highlights of the foreign policy aspect of the party program?
Well, the current world order, it's an imperialist world order. Canada, along with the major advanced capitalist countries, they're all kind of joined in this military alliance, and particularly I want to focus on NATO. NATO, the North Atlantic Trade Organization. This military alliance that enforces its member states to continue to put funds into their military, billions of dollars every year goes into our military to enact aggression overseas, and that's because of NATO. So we want to get Canada out of NATO. We want to demilitarize and take the resources and funding and the labor power and put it back into rebuilding people's economy. We want to take control of all of these transnational, there's mining companies that are headquartered in Canada that are stripping away wealth from the global south and impoverishing the global south, and we want to change that.
Okay.
Yeah, and Canada, it's more and more lately, it's becoming just a toady of the United States. Canadians always love to say, oh, well, we're not as bad as the United States, but that only means that we're just like 2 steps behind. The United States, they have hundreds of military bases all across the world. They want to dominate the world and protect their economic interests, and Canada is following suit. And we want to divert from that destructive course.
Yeah, I think the U.S. has done a lot of they've done a lot of tours around the Taiwan Straits, and when I look at Chinese media, they're definitely not happy about that and their nuclear power. So that is a little concerning. I think it would concern a lot of people if
Yeah,
we're
well, yeah. Well, in our military, or in our media, sorry, you always hear, oh, Russia and China, they're the big bad guys. They're big and scary, and that's why we need to have all these military bases. Russia and China don't have this type of military expansionism that the US does. They are not expansionist. If you look at the things they're doing, China is much more multilateral, much more peaceful. You'll hear news reports of like, oh, China is doing this and that in the South China Sea. Well, it's like, okay, who else is in the South China Sea? Oh, the United States. What are they doing there? Nothing good.
well,
They're encircling China. They're trying to encircle Russia and China, and all these threats, this Red Scare kind of threats about Russia and China. It's like narcissistic projection on an international level. Like the entire state is just projecting their own misdeeds onto Russia and China. That's what it is.
well, I mean, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something for people to know about. I mean, do you have any like final thoughts or anything else that you want our listeners to be brought attention to?
Yeah, I think Canada's a capitalist state. It's also a colonialist state. There's a lot of repression of Indigenous people. And what we want to do is we want to take apart we want, like I said earlier, we want to abolish the Senate, and we want to create a House of Nations. We want to pull the restart lever on this whole thing and take all these different nations within Canada and put them on equal footing. We want to commit to building a better world. And that starts with people taking control. People need to realize their collective power, and we need to stand up and we need to fight.
Excellent closing. And with that, we are going to wrap up the show. You're going to hear the outro, and then you're going to hear the song. What was the name of the song again? Janis selected the song.
So it's by a band called Love. It's this old band from the 60s, I believe, and the song is called Alone Again or.
Oh, yes. Yeah, very hard for me to remember the name of that. So Alone Again or by Love from the 60s. Okay.
You got it.
So yes, with that, that's everything. And we're concluding the show. Hope you enjoyed that interview, everyone. Have a good one. Socially radical. Socially radical. Socially radical. Socially radical. Socially radical. Socially radical. Guitarist.
Yeah, said it's alright. I won't forget all the times I've waited patiently for you. And you'll do just what you choose to do. And I will be alone again tonight, my dear. Yeah, I heard a funny thing. Somebody said to me, you know that I could be in love with almost everyone. I think that people